Trade talks for Kevin Durant are heating up, and we'll break down the latest on what we've heard. But is Miami near a deal, or are they being just used for leverage? And does the front office feel a sense of urgency to get this done? We'll answer that on today's episode of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat, whether you're tuning in on YouTube or on your favorite podcast app. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. I'm Wes Goldberg here with David Ramil. Both of us are credentialed Heat media members who cover this team every day. For daily content on the Heat, click that subscribe button on YouTube. Make sure you are following us on your podcast app. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins on FanDuel. Have a great show for you today. We have got more on the Kevin Durant front, including a segment, half empty or half full. Are the Miami Heat simply being used for leverage here? Or do they actually have the inside track? We're going to attack the latest on Kevin Durant from all angles. Plus, later on in the show, we'll talk about the Desmond Bane trade to Orlando and how that impacts things for Miami and whether or not that impacts the price for Kevin Durant. But let's start with the news. ESPN reporting over the weekend that the Miami Heat, San Antonio Spurs, and Houston Rockets are Kevin Durant's preferred trade destinations. Further reporting, Durant is only willing to sign a long-term deal with those teams, at least for now. But that is not stopping other teams from potentially calling Phoenix about Durant. It sounds like half a dozen teams or so could still be interested in maybe even taking Durant, risking it for maybe even a year rental. Teams like Toronto, the Clippers, these teams have been mentioned in terms of, you know what, maybe we'd be willing to just trade for Durant for a year and see what happens. But, David, we talked about what looked like was close to a list of preferred destinations last week as this reporting has gotten out there. This, to me, is a big step. This is the official list of trade destinations. And it's not the first time Miami has been on Kevin Durant's list of preferred trade destinations, but now it involves the Texas teams as well. This, to me, is a big deal because now it feels like a trade is imminent, right? We've got the list of destinations. We know that Phoenix and Kevin Durant are working together to sort through some of these trade offers. And there'll be some more reporting probably between now and Durant's ultimate trade. But this is the final big domino that had to happen before Durant trade ultimately materialized, right? You're always waiting for the official list of destinations, and we got it.
No doubt. It certainly shows that Miami is one of the top teams being considered here. And yet I can't help but feel hesitant knowing what we went through with the Dame Lillard trade, that it seems like given the three preferred destinations, the field still somehow has the advantage, right? The other teams, that there's some dark horse candidate that we don't even know about yet that might swoop in out of left field and just be willing to offer twice as much as Miami, or just the right combination of picks and players that might be of interest to the Suns front office. And that's enough to eclipse whatever Miami could potentially put together, because that's not how Miami operates. They try to get the best deal possible. And it's a smart way of doing it. That's how you operate. That's how you negotiate. You don't start off by giving up your best offer right away. And it's burnt Miami in the past. And so you wonder whether or not Miami, while still being named as one of the preferred destinations, how much legitimacy that actually holds once the process really starts to become finalized.
Right. It's a great call. And bringing up the Damian Lillard thing is also a nice little reminder that, hey, this thing isn't done until it's done. And even if you think that Miami should have the inside track, it doesn't matter. Weirdly enough, it almost helps Miami that there's other teams that Durant would like to go to, right? Because the biggest mistake that they made in the Lillard stuff was trade me to Miami and only Miami, and that pissed off Portland and the NBA and everybody around it. And in this instance, it kind of feels like most people are talking about the Texas teams and not Miami. I don't know about you, but every time I tune into a podcast or ESPN or something, the Heat are kind of just over here as, yeah, they're on the list, but there's no real way to get it done. And yet I feel like of all of the things that these teams look, I think there's an obvious need for Houston, right? That's probably the cleanest fit in terms of Kevin Durant goes there, becomes the number one scorer. Houston, playoff team last year, awesome defense, well coached, all these things. It feels like they're Kevin Durant away from potentially getting to the Western Conference Finals.
Yep.
the idea of San Antonio is clearly the most interesting, right?
Yeah.
The pairing 37-year-old Kevin Durant with Victor Wembanyama is the thing that is the most fun to talk about. So that's why it's being talked about as much as it is.
Yeah.
And yet every time you hear Miami brought up, it's, oh yeah, and also Miami. But
Right.
like, really, what are they even doing? And even among the fan base, as you and I know very well, it's split of, well, what's even the point of getting Kevin Durant? Does that really move the needle for them? You've got Bill Simmons
Right.
over the weekend being like, what does that even mean? What does that even do for them? And I understand questioning it. I really do. I get it. Like, that's a fair question. We also know that that's not how the Heat operate. They don't operate in terms of, does this make us contenders? That's not the question they ask. The question they ask is, does this give us a chance? Does this give us a better chance? And there's also no question that having Kevin Durant on your roster gives you a better chance to do something in the Eastern Conference. And I think that's why Miami needs to be taken seriously here, is regardless of what the outside perspective is on this, Miami looks at trades like this as generally worth it, but we also know that they draw a line in the sand in terms of, this is what we're willing to give up, this is what we are not willing to give up. And the more I get to it, David, and the more people I talk to and things like that, I think the line is going to be drawn at Kel'el Ware. I don't think the Heat are going to include Kel'el Ware in a Kevin Durant trade. I think they've decided it probably does not make sense for them.
I have to agree there. It's a tough line to draw. I know a lot of, even as we've suggested or talked about in past episodes, a lot of our fans are just really stuck on the idea, no, you don't trade a guy like Ware, regardless of how he develops. And there's no way of knowing that. He might not ever reach the pinnacle of his career in Miami. We've seen this before. Sometimes a player just needs a change of scenery. Maybe they're not being utilized properly. Maybe it's just a matter of roster construction. There are so many different factors that could potentially disable or propel a player's individual development. And it just might never happen for Kel'el here in Miami, regardless. But there's also the hope that he could become that, like a 7-footer that can shoot, block shots, etc.
Can I give a shout out to another portion of the fan base that we don't really talk about, at least in the YouTube comments?
Sure.
There is a group of people in the YouTube comments that hear you say this and be like, no, trade Ware. What are we talking about? It's Kevin freaking Durant. Go, like, there is, I would argue, an equal amount of fans who are just like, Kel'el Ware, who cares? He's a rookie. He's a second-year player. Trade him. We're going to get Kevin Durant. I think the fan base is pretty split.
Yeah, I think Miami would love to hold on to him the same way they probably would have preferred to hold on to, say, Caron Butler in 2004. But hey, when you can go after a Shaquille O'Neal, or in this case, a Kevin Durant, even if they're aging or whatever, you still do it 100 times out of 100. There's no hesitation there. Their preference would be to keep Kel'el 100%, and yet I'm sure that if it came down to that or him being shipped elsewhere, especially elsewhere in the Eastern Conference, Miami would say, okay, fine, we'll budge on this regard. So I don't think that's going to impede a deal. I think it's just what they're hoping. They'll include almost anybody else. I'm wondering
if it's going to impede a deal. I'm wondering if that's the line that they draw. Yeah, I'm wondering if it's, hey, you want Kel'el Ware? Too bad, it's not happening. We're going to help. We'll help you find a center somewhere else.
I don't think so, unless. And look, we know that the front office has nothing but immense appreciation for what he did as a rookie. They believe in him. They like his work ethic, all of the things.
There's a reason
they like that about Tyler Hero too, and they were willing to include him for anything. So I don't think that's going to stop them. I think that's the line that they'd like to draw in saying, this is exactly what we'd want to keep. You can have our Duncan Robinsons, you can have our Terry Roziers, our Andrew Wiggins, our picks, whatever. We don't care. But we're not going to we don't prefer to give up Kel'el Ware. But if they say, listen, if you don't give us Ware, we're going to send him to New York. Okay, you can have Ware. I think that's ultimately what it'll come down to for Miami, just because the front office has always operated that way. Like, they're going to wait until the last second. And Pat Riley, Andy Ellisberg, etc., they're masterful negotiators. It's burnt them in the past because of where they draw that line, and they hope that eventually the opposing team that they're dealing with will cave, but that isn't always the case. And yet, I think Miami would still ultimately, you can't do that either in negotiations. Once the deal falls through because you're unwilling, or at least on the surface unwilling, to include Ware, you can't call back and be like, no, we were just kidding, we'll include Ware.
But to your point, like, recently they have drawn that line and not gotten over it, and not gotten Kevin Durant, not gotten Damian Lillard, not gotten these players. And the difference between KD and Shaq was 32 when he was traded to Miami.
Still an MVP type player, yeah. Durant
is probably not an MVP. I don't know. he was like in the top 5 of MVP on the MVP ladders and things like that within the first few months of last season. But he's also going to be 37, and it's fair to wonder how many more years does he have left. And you're going to have to give him that contract extension. That's why I think Miami would say, you know what? As much as we would love to have Kevin Durant, it's not moving the needle enough for us at this point for long enough where we're going to be willing to give up Ware. I'm open to being wrong, but I'm just telling you, like, my feel for it is, and I'm trying to phrase this the best I can. My feel for it is that line in the sand is a pretty strong line when it comes to Kel'el Ware. But to your point, like, things change and negotiations change and the league changes. And ultimately, if they say, you know what, Giannis isn't moving, Kevin Durant is out there, like, we kind of have to go make a move, and maybe they ultimately just do it. And maybe they're able to solve that center need in other ways too, right? Even if they do trade Kel'el Ware, like we did in our Locked On NBA mock draft. So there's a tease for that little thing. All right, let's move it along here. Things might be trending in Miami's direction as far as trade talks go. We'll tell you why, or maybe why not, after this.
Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. You ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out or spending some money online, doing a little shopping here and there, maybe a couple entertainment things during the course. We all live in South Florida. We know what that's like. It's easy to lose track, but that's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So you stop just managing your money and you start building wealth. When you start using Monarch, you'll realize just how much you're spending on food delivery and entertainment. Now, and I know this from personally, you budget smarter and you save more. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for half off your first year. We'll be right back.
I want to get to this part of the report from The Athletic that I feel like kind of got overlooked over the weekend, David.
Yeah.
They also reported on Kevin Durant's list of preferred destinations and focused on the San Antonio and Houston part of it.
Yeah.
And while mentioning that Kevin Durant would prefer to play in San Antonio or Houston, and we talked about why Kevin Durant might want to be playing in Texas at the end of last week, but they said, yes, he would prefer to play in San Antonio or Houston, but, and this is the part that I feel like got overlooked, it's becoming less likely that those teams offer up their best packages. And some of the reporting around San Antonio specifically over the last few days feels like the Spurs have maybe cooled on the idea of getting Kevin Durant for whatever reason.
Yep.
And it's clear that they're not going to include the number 2 pick. And maybe that's what it was. Maybe it was, hey, they had trade calls with Phoenix, and Phoenix was like, hey, we want the number 2 pick. And San Antonio was like, no.
No, thanks.
And maybe the two sides are just too far apart. Now, San Antonio does have, I think, the 14th pick also in the draft. So maybe, the 14th pick and the 2nd pick are very different, as we know. They have some other picks. They have some young players, things like that. So maybe they can go back to the negotiating table. And that, again, I am just speculating here. But the reporting around the Spurs at least suggests that they've cooled on the idea of Kevin Durant, maybe are backing off of that right now, where it felt like there was a lot of people just going so far as to predict that Kevin Durant was going to end up on the Spurs a week ago. But again, things have changed, it seems. And then with Houston, it never has felt like the Rockets were going all in for Kevin Durant. And this idea, by the way, that just because Houston owns a bunch of these future Phoenix picks, 2027 and a few other ones, that they would just like offer those for Kevin Durant. If I'm Houston, why would I do that? I know you're going to trade Kevin Durant. You're either trading him to me or to some other team. And I know you're going to be worse.
Yeah.
Why would I give you your pick back? That could be a really good pick. Why would I just do that? That's not free money. That's my pick now. So I don't know that Houston looks at Kevin Durant with their core and says, yep, that's what we're going to spend this awesome draft, these awesome assets on, where they could wait for something else potentially that fits maybe more of their timeline. So we're going to play a little game of half empty, half full here.
Mm-hmm.
Where are you now on... Are you looking at the glass half empty, half full in terms of Miami's chances to land KD?
I'm looking at it more half full, to be honest with you. I think if these other teams were much more determined to get something done, something would be done by now. It almost felt like at
Mm.
the end of last week when we were recording and talking about the latest on KD news, as you said, it felt like KD to the Spurs was a foregone conclusion. You had John Gambodero talking in Phoenix saying his people close to him, Spurs, or whatever, like it was going to happen. Almost like everybody else was an afterthought. And then you had the Knicks potentially coming in, and they were a strong contender. We talked about Minnesota as being a very intriguing option for KD as well. And yet none of those things seems to have manifested. So now it's interesting how Miami always gets overlooked. And the last time that happened at a significant level was in 2019 when everybody
Mm.
was sending Jimmy Butler to Houston or the Clippers. And that was the final destination. Oh, he's going to be a Clipper. Oh, he's going to be a Rock. I can't recall how many people, reporters like us, talking about the Rockets were a done deal. That was the best fit for him. Not even considering Miami. Remember the conversations following the acquisition of Jimmy Butler. It was, oh, he's coming to retire in Miami Beach like so many other seniors before him. I mean that was pretty ridiculous. And obviously, in hindsight, it turned out to be pretty ridiculous in general for people to even consider that. But I feel like that's the same thing. Like Miami, clearly not a contending team. And while San Antonio probably isn't a contending team either, at least they have the promise of Victor Wembanyama. And so you can talk yourself into that. Well, that's the best fit. That would be an exciting team. You have an older veteran, KD. You have a young superstar in Wembanyama. It's going to be a team to contend or at least make things interesting. Houston, a really good team, second in the Western Conference. I mean, they played really good basketball and maybe a KD away from true contention. They were exposed by the Golden State Warriors a little bit in the playoffs, and they just didn't have enough offensively. So you wonder whether or not KD might be that final factor. And then there's Miami. Nobody cares about Miami. Nobody talks about Miami. Nobody even thinks that they're a realistic option. They don't have enough. Pat Riley's washed. They don't do anything. It's just these constant narratives that always kind of play out here. Even we went through this with the Lillard talks. Like when it felt like Damian Lillard to Miami was 99% done, people were still discounting what Miami had to offer in terms of their trade package and everything else like that. And it turned out to be for different reasons ultimately that a deal never got done. And yet I think everybody just seems to want to always discount Miami's role in all this. So you're asking me if I'm half full or half empty. I like Miami's chances. They're always in the conversation for a reason. And I don't know why that is the case. I can't pinpoint it to any one thing because if you look at it just on paper, Miami might not have the best package available to acquire a player like KD. Maybe they didn't have the best package available to acquire a guy like Damian Lillard, but yet they're always in the conversation for a reason. Everybody always considers them. And this coming from the player is one thing, but it doesn't matter what KD prefers if Phoenix doesn't like what Miami has to offer. You can prefer whatever the hell you want. You could prefer going to the goddamn moon, but we're not going to send you there because there's no team that can trade with what we want. So preferences don't matter ultimately. And you wouldn't have such a clearly stated report. At least I don't think so.
Well, the fact that he could become a free agent in 2026,
okay,
that's when he's able to start moving the market a little bit.
But that's but you don't have to worry about that from Phoenix perspective.
No,
that's not a
but
concern
Kevin
for
Durant could put the kibosh on potential trade packages. For instance, the team that has fallen off of these lists is Minnesota. Durant has clearly signaled to Minnesota, I'm not going to sign there long term. So Minnesota says, okay, then we're not going to trade for you. So any potential package that Phoenix doesn't get to choose from the Minnesota package anymore because it's not on the table. So Durant has leverage.
Well, or you could take a chance though. I mean,
sure, if they
Toronto
want.
and Kawhi Leonard. Yeah. I mean,
sure, totally, absolutely. But they also might not. Yeah. Whereas if Durant said, yeah, I would sign there, then Minnesota would be like, okay, great, here's the package. It would be no questions, right? So, but to your point, it could go either way, but Durant can influence it potentially. I think the other part that gets lost here a lot is, well, San Antonio and Houston can beat any package from Miami, so Miami is just discounted, which is true. But just because they can doesn't mean they will. And instead of looking at the best packages that these teams can offer, it might be more instructive to look at sort of the middle-y packages that these teams can offer.
Yeah.
And who has the best middle-y package? And you look at like Houston's midi package. What is it? Jalen Green, Dylan Brooks in the 10th pick. Okay. It's not bad. Depends. It really depends on what you think of Jalen Green if you're Phoenix.
Not much.
But I'm going to build around Jalen Green, Devin Booker, and I still have Bradley Beal on my roster. That doesn't seem like that works. Dylan Brooks makes some sense for them. Having the 10th pick might be nice. But I don't know that I want to be committed to Jalen Green in that way.
No.
San Antonio, again, you're not getting Stephon Castle. You're not getting De'Aaron Fox. You're not getting the number 2 pick. You're probably not getting their best picks. Okay, so what is it? Harrison Barnes, Keldon Johnson? Would they even include Devin Vassell? I don't know.
Yeah.
They seem to really like him. Barnes, Keldon Johnson, the 14th pick. Is that moving the needle for me? And I'm not sitting here telling you that Wiggins, Duncan Robinson, and like Jaime or Nico in the 20th pick is some sort of home run package. But it's right there with those other packages. And it offers you the cap flexibility that these other teams can't offer you in terms of the Duncan Robinson part of it. San Antonio can offer you a little bit of flexibility because of where they are against the cap, but not as much. So I don't know, and how many picks are those teams willing to ultimately include, and how many picks is Miami ultimately willing to include here is a big part of this. Because Miami can include the 20th pick later this month and then 2 more first. So they can include a maximum of 3. Houston and San Antonio could beat that. But again, the question isn't can they, the question is would they? And just based on the reporting around Houston and San Antonio, I don't know that they would.
Yeah, I tend to agree there. It's going to be interesting. All these trade talks like this for a superstar, something always comes out later on, and in terms of what swayed things in one way. And I think we are going to hear about the teams that were this close, or maybe ultimately just said, you know what, that's too rich for our blood. And yet, again, I just, to answer the first question, how are you feeling? Do you think it's half full or half empty at this point? Because I think you stand in the same position I do, which is to say that we like Miami's chances. That the fact that they're in this conversation to begin with, and that they've gone as far as they have, I think it's as close to a slam dunk as you can possibly get. And yet there's always a potential.
Give me a percentage. Where are you?
Percentage-wise, I'd say 75.
I was going to say 65.
Yeah.
And I felt like that even that was pretty optimistic, considering that, it's Miami or the field potentially here.
Yeah.
I'm
I'm
weird with this stuff because that's in some the locked on Heat position is 70. On one hand, I'm always pretty optimistic with this stuff. I was optimistic about Damian Lillard until the very end, right?
Yeah,
I was optimistic that even before I thought for sure there was a moment in February that I was like, oh my God, we're about to trade Jimmy Butler for Kevin Durant. There was a point where I was at 90% there. And I don't even know that I was wrong. I just think that talks basically dissolved.
Right.
But I tend to be a little optimistic, but also hesitantly so, if that makes any sense. I'm at 65 and I won't let myself get up to 80.
No, not after Lillard. I was so convinced of Lillard.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you and I represented the more cocky and or arrogant, at least in terms of what other fan bases or even media members believed as far as South Florida or Miami Heat-based reporters.
Yeah, we were not on Matt Moore's bleep list.
No. But it felt like a done deal. It felt like Miami had everything. They were positioned in just the right way. It seemed like such an obvious fit. He was clearly flirting with Miami, and after that finals run, it just seemed like they were going to find a way to get it done. And then ultimately, I guess the Portland front office was just like, no, we don't like the way this is working out. We're going to do what else is available to us. And nobody expected Milwaukee. Milwaukee came in at the 11th hour.
That's what I'm waiting for. What's the team?
Yeah.
Nobody expected Toronto when Kawhi got traded to Toronto. We've seen this before. My favorite, out of left field trade for Durant is, would Phoenix just say, bleep it, we'll trade Durant for Zion Williamson?
Oh my God.
And New Orleans just says, we get out of the Zion business. We get Kevin Durant here for a little while, sell some tickets, try to take a step in the right direction as a franchise, and then he leaves in a year. I don't know.
He gets reunited with Billy Donovan in Chicago. Do they do some kind of deal with Josh Giddey or something? I don't know. There's a lot of different potential options there.
There is.
There's always that dark horse candidate.
There is. Something to watch for. Meanwhile, Kevin Durant trade has not happened as of us recording this, but we did get a big trade over the weekend. Desmond Bain goes to Orlando, and maybe not on its face, but trust me, there is a lot of ripple effects, ways that this impacts the Miami Heat. We're going to talk about that next here on Locked On Heat.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA Finals are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. See, I can't believe the season is almost at an end, but you know what? There's still plenty of opportunity right now, whether it's a game-time winning shot or a breakout player. There's never been a better time to get in on the action, and FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live with player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays. Fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. Right now, you might have a couple games left in the NBA season. Now is the time to capitalize. So head over to FanDuel. It's a perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel right now, FanDuel.com, and place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you get $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. We'll be right back.
Let's talk about the big trade that happened over the weekend. Desmond Bain to the Orlando Magic for 4 first-round picks, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, and Cole Anthony. And the big question here now is, what does this do to the trade market? What does this mean for the Miami Heat? We'll start with the trade market for Kevin Durant first. 4 first-round picks for Desmond Bain is a lot. That's a lot.
Yep.
But do you think it impacts at all the price of Kevin Durant? Because you could argue that, well, Kevin Durant is a much better player than Desmond Bain, which is true. Not as young, but better. And say, well, if Bain went for 4, what Desmond Durant has to go for what? 12 first-round picks? Like, what? Do you think this impacts the price of Durant, though? Because I don't think it works that way.
I don't think so either. I think there's a set market, and the teams involved are kind of drawing their line. Like, I mean, again, you got 4 first-round picks going for Desmond Bain, and then you have Miami fans saying, "No, you can't trade Kel'el Ware for Kevin Durant." Like that's just where the markets are completely different, and what teams are offering for KD is not. And I think Orlando screwed the pooch tremendously. Like, Bain's a fine addition. I like him as a player. We liked him coming into the draft, and yet they gave up way too much, in my opinion, for it. I think it's maybe a move that helps them, but I don't think it's enough to really include that kind of draft. And maybe I'm mistaken. Like, I mean, again, for somebody who tends to devalue the draft as much as I do, even I'm kind of like 4 first-round picks for Desmond Bain. Like, you know, it just seems like too much. It feels a little bit like the Rudy Gobert trade a couple of years ago.
Reminds me of the Bridges trade from last year.
Yeah.
I get it, because nobody thought Desmond Bain was available.
Sure.
So if you're Orlando and you say, well, this is the guy we want, let's call Memphis and say, what's it going to take? We want Desmond Bain. That's the guy. He's not so on the ball that he's going to dominate and take the ball away from Paolo and Franz, but he could do enough on the ball. Maybe we think we could tap into a little bit more on the ball with him. But he could definitely do some stuff on the ball. He had to experiment with that a lot over the last couple of years with Ja in and out of the lineup.
Yep.
High character guy, hard worker, doesn't take anything off the table for us defensively. Like, he's just the right fit. Kind of how the Knicks looked at Mikal Bridges as, went to Villanova, we got to get this guy. And what's it going to cost you, right? If these guys aren't for sale, then you got to make them for sale. And that's why I don't think it impacts the Kevin Durant market, is because everybody knows that Kevin Durant is for sale. Phoenix is clearly going to trade Kevin Durant. They've been shopping him for months now. So you just don't get the same price, right? Like, you don't get to shop Kevin Durant at a premium. You are shopping him at a discount, right? Kevin Durant is almost on the clearance rack, right? Like, there's a big sign outside of Phoenix Suns that says going out of business. Everything must go. And Memphis was just sort of sitting here like, we got a house that we love, but if you come knocking on the door and offer, $1 million over asking price or something, I guess we're going to sell it. I guess we got to sell the house. Like, we can't say no to it. And that's sort of what it feels like happened here.
Yeah. That's a good analogy. I think it works out pretty well. It's, again, I think comparatively speaking, KD is very much still a much better player than Desmond Bain is. You wonder why. I don't know. Like, should Orlando not have tried to see if they could make that kind of move for KD? Like, I mean, wouldn't that have been a better deal?
I think they like
Phoenix have preferred to get that?
I think they like Bain because he's 27 and Paolo and Franz are 22 and 23, and they said, we're here for a long time, not a good time. I don't know.
Maybe, but I think the move also kind of signals the shifting mindset in the Eastern Conference.
Yes,
And
that's
I
where I
know
want
that's
to go
kind
with.
of
Yep.
yeah. It signifies the idea that it's a wide open field. Cleveland dominant last year during the regular season and exposed a tad there. Indiana maybe over exceeding expectations to a certain degree. Boston going to be kind of punting this year because of the loss of Jason Tatum. So there's very good teams. New York still weak, going through a coaching change. Who knows what's going to happen with that group right now? Can they get better than they were this year? Maybe, or they could also get worse. And so right now you look at all the top teams in the Eastern Conference, and any one of them could emerge as an Eastern Conference champion. And if that's the case, we're seeing with Indiana right now, like they took a historically good Oklahoma City team and have evened up the series. And maybe again, I don't mean to discredit Indiana. If anything, I think we're certainly believers in what the Pacers are capable of, but they've challenged the Thunder in a way that I don't think a lot of people expected them to.
Right.
And so when you look at it
People
from
will
that
believe that they're
perspective,
beatable, right?
yes.
Even if they go ahead and win the championship. And I think Indiana is awesome. And they are the number one seed in the East next year. They're the number one team in the East next year already. Like they've already proven by being in a 2-2 tie with the Thunder.
Yeah.
They are capable of winning the championship, which means they are the best team in the Eastern Conference. Because I think Cleveland, to your point, showed real flaws. You can't not have questions about the Cavs at this point. And I love that Cavs team in the regular season. And
Absolutely.
they wiped the floor with Miami in the first round. But you can't walk away from these playoffs and feel good about what the Cavs got going on in terms of winning a championship. Boston, we already talked about. Maybe you said New York maybe isn't as good. My bet would be, yeah, I don't think you're as good. I think they're going to screw up this coaching thing in a big way. I think the East is wide open, and so you've got the Magic now making. I don't know if this is an all-in move, but it's a really like this is as all-in as Orlando gets, right? What wasn't the last time they made a trade was like for Markelle Fultz in 2019 or something? Like they don't trade for players. This is as all-in as they get, and they probably have another move or two to make, by the way, this offseason. It feels like the Magic are saying, we're betting on Paolo making that superstar leap. We think Jalen Suggs can be our point guard of the future. We're betting on Franz taking up another level, and we just think Desmond Bane is the perfect fit around those guys. Let's go for this. Does this mean that the Heat then need to be more aggressive? Because the Orlando's in our division, right? Like we're talking about the team that's won the Southeast Conference or division 2 years in a row now. I don't know. Does the Heat look at the Desmond Bane trade and say, we kind of really need to land Kevin Durant now?
I would think so. I would think so. Although I think landing Kevin Durant would certainly help Miami. And yet I don't know whether or not that makes them clearly better than Orlando either, right? Like, I mean, Orlando's a really good team and they can make more moves that might not be the same kind of home run swing as trying to acquire KD, but they can improve the roster just enough so that you already have the superstar young talent in Franz Wagner and Paolo Banchero, et cetera, and Jalen Suggs. Like you've got enough there. It seems like Miami has to acquire KD, and yet they also have to do something else in order to be able to really propel them past the rest of those top teams in the Eastern Conference.
I think that's exactly right. And it's, what we've talked about, right? The idea of, hey, does adding Kevin Durant to Miami make them a contender in the East? No, you and I aren't sitting here and being like, if the Heat just put Kevin Durant on the roster, all of a sudden they're contenders in the East. But it's a step in that direction, and it would require also some other things that we think that the Heat would try to do, right? They wouldn't stop here. And by the way, that's the benefit of maybe getting a Kevin Durant deal done early is if you get it done by the draft, you've got all of free agency to figure out the rest of this thing. And I do think that the Desmond Bane trade to Orlando signifies that there is urgency in the East by some teams. And if you're not pushing forward to try to make the most out of these next couple of years, year or two, then you might as well go backwards. Because there's no point, especially for a team that's been in the play-in tournament 3 years in a row like Miami, to just stay where you are. So that kind of leads us to our next conversation that we want to have this week, which is, okay, if not Kevin Durant, then what for Miami? Like, what's the plan B? So that could be a nice place to stop this conversation. We'll pick it up again when we get into that. But for now, thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NBA Big Board Show. NBA draft expert Rafael Barlow reacts to every workout, interview, and rumor leading up to the NBA draft. Find Locked On NBA Big Board on YouTube and wherever you listen to podcasts. Also, we're in the middle of the Stanley Cup. Go check out Locked On Panthers and go Cats.